both interviews as well as real life. You should like all the companies, their code base is designed according to OOPS. There's no company which takes like uses otherwise. So OOPS is a very important concept, and you should be really thorough with it. And knowing only the theoretical aspects is not enough. You will need to code everything, and will need to make sure your your object-oriented design is flexible and effective and efficient, and even memory efficient. So today I'll explain you every concept along with the respective codes. Also, at the end of the session, I'll point you to a GitHub repo, and there is a activity, or you can say a mini project for you. You can for those you can solve those activities which we have given, and then make a pull request there, and we can check. A few days later we will also upload the ideal solution of that, and yeah. So this OOPS series will be taken by both me and my friend Saurabha. He has interned at DSHA earlier. So preferably the first two sessions will be by me, and the next two will be by him. So let's get started. So I hope you can all see my screen, and let's start. So before we jump to object-oriented programming, we should know about the kind of programming that we usually do. So the usual things that you write in a C++ code, the things that you in your first year you might have done it in your labs, in your PDS labs, that kind of programming. So basically it is in three parts, which each part being the subpart of other. The first one we have is imperative programming. Imperative programming is basically just naming the kind of programming we do. It just tells you that in this programming we are giving the computer proper instructions to how to change the program state, what to do after what. That is known that is a very broad definition and is known as imperative programming. Now we come to structured programming. For structured programming, we aim our aim is to improve the clarity of our programs and the effectiveness of our programs. So rather than just giving instructions one by one, we use better structures like if, then, else, and we use while, for, all those things. And the best format of programming in these areas is procedural programming. You must know that you make various functions, you create various functions, and then you call those functions. So basically we are dividing our program, our structured program into various procedures and calling them. Even procedures can call each other. Basically this is defining functions in C++ or maybe methods in Java. So that is known as procedural programming. This is the basic programming that you must be familiar with, that you must have done. Now we come to object-oriented programming. As we know, these procedural programming and all these things are not very close to the real world. We don't see random binary search methods in actual scenarios or around us. Object-oriented programming aims to lessen that gap. It basically creates objects that you see in the real world. For example, you can see here a car. Okay, so a car has a lot, like some methods and attributes. Methods are the one which the car can do. For example, it can go refuel, it can set its speed limit, we can drive it, we can stop it. All these things are methods of the car. And similarly, the car has some attributes like its fuel, its max speed, maybe its model, maybe its brand, and all those things. So this is very near to the real world. Object-oriented programming is this modeling of the real world into our code. I'll be showing all the codes in C++, but you guys can understand it via Java or other things also. The code is very similar. Only a bit of syntax is different. Otherwise, it is very similar. So, for example, in OOPS, this thing is called an object, or the blueprint of this thing is called a class. We'll discuss more about it, but you can just understand how this class is defined, and we can just model this thing into a code. So this class, the class is car, and we have its attributes fuel, max speed, and we have its functions or methods, that is refuel, set speed, etc., etc. Also, now let's get started with the basic concept here, that is classes. Classes can be termed as a blueprint of our objects. Like for example, you may have three cars of the same model. Now those three cars are different objects, but they define the same features on same methods and the same attributes. So it's better if we model a blueprint for those three cars, that those three cars can use, like, be individual as well and also have the same functions. So we use class. In this example, I have given the class student and the class teacher and the class section. As you can see, we can define a class student. A student may have some name and may have a roll number or an ID. So these two things are the attributes of the class student. Using this class, we may create objects like different student S1, S2, S3, other things, but the blueprint remains the same. Similarly, class teacher. Now, a teacher may have name, the ID, the subject, and now along with the student and teacher, you may make a class, a section of a school, maybe the ID may be section A, for example, and then you may have a vector is like a list in C++, for those who don't know. So you can have a list of students and a list of teachers. Now since we have a list of teachers, we know which subject they teach. So as you can see, this is very real to what we have experienced and what uh, what we see around us. And now for object, as we saw before, an object is an instance of a class. So for example, we had a class student, we had a class teacher. Now we need to make one student. There's a student S1, a student S2, and a teacher T1. So this S1, S2, and T1 are known as the objects of the classes. The S1 and S2 is an object of the class student. T1 is an object of the class teacher. So you get it, right? The students, the S1, S2 is an instance of our blueprint. Our blueprint was the class, and our object is an instance of that blueprint. Do you have any doubts? If you have any doubts, you can write it in the Q&A part. I'll give you a minute. Okay, I think it is clear. So let's move on to the next part. This object and class creation are like the basic things you need to know. You should know uh, from an interview point of view, you should know how to write this, the syntax. You may choose your language. It can be Java, Python, or C++. Java is an object-oriented based language. Anyway, you have to write in the object format. But C++ and Python also have good interfaces for this classes and for object-oriented programming. So you should know how to declare attributes, how do we access these attributes, how do we write the methods that may be inside, the exact syntax, and how usually we should make the classes. Now we'll go through all this. So I don't see any questions. Okay, let's go to constructors. So a constructor is basically a member function of a class. It initializes all the attributes of the class. Uh, so whenever we create an object, a constructor for that object is called. A constructor you can say it's a function. That constructor is called, and whatever is given in that function is used to initialize the object. For example, first one, let's go with this. We have a string name, a string, the same class we have student, and we have its attributes as name and id. You can ignore this public part, I'll explain this later. We have a string name and int id. These are the attributes of the class. Now this is our constructor. As you can see, a constructor has the same name as the class. So you have the class student and you are creating a constructor of the same name. You don't need to write int student or void student, because constructors do not have a return type. They are just used for initialization. You don't really need to call a constructor. It is initialized as soon as you create an object. And even if you don't define a custom constructor, there's like C++ will generate a default constructor, and like there won't be any parameters as such, and it will just initialize as some garbage value or null as on the all the attributes. For example, see here, we have a string name int id. These are the attributes. We create a constructor, and its name will be same as the class name, student, and we do name is equal to not satisfied and id is -1. So whenever we create an object, like we created an object here, then whenever this is done, the constructor would like give the name as not specified and id as -1. So this is like, since here you are not giving any parameters in this bracket, you are not giving any arguments to this method. So this will be known as a default constructor. And here we have a parameterized constructors. What you may be while initializing an object, you may be possible that you already know the name of the student and the id of the student. Like that is entirely possible. So you rather than just like initializing it with some garbage value and some random value, you initialize the student with the name and id that you know. So this is the same thing. You have the attribute string name and int id. You have a student class student. You create a constructor of the same name as student, but now you give arguments. You give the parameters which you want here. Usually these parameters are the same thing as this, like you give a parameter for name, you give a parameter for id. So you can just give a parameter for name, give a parameter for id, and then you initialize it. You can also give some other things that you might want to initialize and stuff, but that is very uncommon. So you get it, right? Default constructor and parameterized constructor. Even if you don't give any arguments, or even if you don't create any constructor explicitly, C++ will automatically generate a constructor, and it will be of the form like this, without any parameters, student, and name will be some garbage value, and id will also be some garbage value. So I have a question for you. For example, you create a constructor student. You are giving string s name and int sid. What if this id is equal to sid? This line wasn't there in our constructor. What would the id be for us. Did you guys get the question?
Maybe you can repeat again.
Okay, I'll give him. See, uh, we made a constructor named student. We have given a string s name and int sid to initialize the student name and the id of the student. For example, while writing the code, we forget this line. ID is equal to SID. We forget to write this line. And so our constructor only has this line. Name is equal to SName. So we know our name will be initialized as SName. But, what will happen to ID? And will this constructor work if we don't have this line? Will it show some error or anything else? What do you think? Yes, okay, I see the answers. It won't show an error. It will be a garbage value. So I see Navneet and Jagdish did it correctly. Yeah, Dipta also. So yeah, it will be initialized as some random garbage value. And yeah. So now another question. Here we are giving all the parameters, right? Is it possible to create a constructor where we do not give all the parameters? Yes or no? Okay, cool. Yes, we can initialize our constructors. Constructors are very flexible in this regard, and we can initialize as many as we want to, as many attributes we want to initialize, and other things will be given as garbage and we can change them later. Okay, so this is how we are initializing. This is our class student. We have a string name int id, and we have a constructor. This is how we initialize. We write student s1 and then we give the arguments we want. So sname will be Arushi, sid will be 1. And we use the dot operator to access any attributes of our class, of our object. So if we print s1.name and s1.id, so we'll get an output like this. Okay. Do you guys have any doubts? Okay, I think we are good. Now, similar to constructor, we have a destructor. Destructor is also a member function of a class and like has the same name as the class, but it is preceded by this operator. So you can see here, this is the destructor. And since constructor is used to initialize the object, destructor will obviously will be used to destroy the object. So whenever we delete a class or the class, basically whenever an object is deleted, the destructor will be called, and all the things that are mentioned inside the destructor will be executed, or the statements. The difference between constructor and destructor is you cannot give any parameters to the destructor. So it cannot be overloaded. I'll explain about overloading functions in the later sessions. But basically, overloading functions is creating more than one function of the same type, of the same name, but with different number of parameters. So if we create a function, for example, if we have two functions in like add, if we have two functions add, in one we do add x1, x2, x3, and in the second function we have just two parameters, add x1 and x2. So C++ won't give it as an error, and the function to be executed will be decided on the number of parameters. That is known as overloading. That's a very broad aspect, and we'll talk about it later. So basically, the point is destructors cannot have any parameters, and they are called using the same name as the class and with this operator. So you can just work out anything you want here. So if this is an example. We have a student, we have a destructor, we are doing cout We are printing destructor call whenever the destructor. So now here we have a main function. If true, we have an if condition. This will obviously be true and it will go inside. We initialize an object s1, similar to before, same as before. This constructor will be called and the name will be given as sname and IDs will be given as SID. Now once, since the student is initialized inside the if block, as soon as we go outside the if block, the student or everything that is initialized inside this if block will be deleted. So this will be done automatically and this will print destructor called. Is there any doubt in this part? Or do you want me to explain it again? Anyone wants me to explain it again? Okay, I will explain again. So, I told you about the constructor and it is used to initialize the class. Now we have a destructor. It is called, automatically called whenever we delete the object that we have constructed. Here you can see if true, and this is the block inside if. So this is the if block that we have. Anything that is initialized inside it will be automatically deleted once our program runs goes outside it. Once the control flow of our program goes outside. How the program is how does the program run? First it goes to int main. You see an opening bracket here, so it goes inside. If it checks if true, so obviously true will always satisfy, so it will go here. And student, we have student s1, we have initialized this object, we have printed some things, and then we close the bracket. That means this block is over. Anything inside this block, anything initialized inside this block doesn't matter anymore. So C++ automatically deletes everything that has been initialized inside this block. Now what has been initialized inside here is s1. So s1 will be automatically deleted. So we do not need to write an explicit statement that delete s1 or something. It is automatically deleted. Now inside C++, like in the backend, C++ only knows that s1 is deleted. It doesn't matter if it is deleted automatically or by some instruction. So whenever a class is deleted, the destructor is called compulsorily. If we do not define a destructor, an implicit destructor is created and basically the memory is freed. That is the work of destructor. We can also add some other statements that we want in the destructor. For example, you have a program which has like same in example, you have students, you have teachers, and you have a section in as the classes. Also you have a array outside. For example, you have an array that has some students, list of students stored. So you want that whenever a student is deleted, the destructor is called automatically, and it is also deleted from that outside list of students. So you can write all that in destructor, so that whenever any student is deleted, it is also deleted from other things, the main database. It is also, so that is the work of a destructor. So basically destructor can be something like a trigger thing, that whenever it is deleted, we have to do these things to clean up the data that we have outside our object or inside some other object. So this is the output that we got. We have this cout thing, we have this print thing that prints Arushi and 1. Then as soon as this program goes outside this if block, the destructor is called, and since we have written here that print destructor called, that destructor is this thing is printed. Is it clear? Is this thing clear which I just told? I'll answer the questions. What is the purpose of putting the code in? I didn't understand the question, Navneet.
In the if block, right? You wrote if true.
Sure. Okay. There's no purpose of writing. This was just to explain that if we have a block like this, then we can, like, the destructor is called as soon as the program flow exits the block. Rather than if true, it could be written like if, for example, if I have given an input marks. So if, and this is an admission test. So if the marks of student is greater than 70, only then that student will be admitted to our institute. So if the marks is greater than 70, rather than 2, we can write marks is greater than 70. It was just an example to show how a destructor is automatically called or an object is automatically deleted as soon as it is like we go outside its block or its where it is valid, that kind of thing. Okay, is that clear, Navneet? Will the default constructor be called even when we define constructors? It depends. For example, you have, I'll show you. For example, you have defined this constructor, right? Student string name and int SID. This is a constructor. But when you are creating the object, you are not giving any parameters. It is just student S1 and then brackets, no parameters here. In that case, the default constructor will be called, because you don't have any function and constructor defined which does not take any parameters. In that case, it will be name and ID will be initialized with some garbage value, and that time default constructor will be called. But if you are giving the parameters like this Arushi and 1, then in that case default constructor will not be called and this constructor will only be called. Also, if this is a class we have and you initialize something as S1 and just Arushi, that is only one parameter, then it would show an error because default constructor does not take any parameters and this constructor takes 2 parameters. So you do not have any constructor defined which takes only one parameter. So that would give you an error and you won't, like no constructor will be called. Basically, it will be an error. Okay. Is that clear? Jitin Krishna, is that clear? If we define a constructor with one parameter, then how ID will be assigned? ID will be given as a garbage value. It was the same thing, the question that I asked, that if you forget to write this line, then what will happen to ID? ID will be a garbage value. So that would be that will be given as garbage value. Yes, default destructor, what it does is it just deletes, it just frees up the memory. That's what it does. There's no other thing as like explicitly what default destructor or anything else that it does.
I think Arkaditya wants to ask if there are different types of destructors are there or not. For example, we had different constructors, right? But
no,
only
destructor
one
is destructor is only of one type. That is it. There's one type of destructor and it takes no parameters and that's it. You cannot do anything. There's not much flexibility with the destructors. No, it won't be assigned. You cannot say it is assigned through default constructor. Like it's like that. If you have defined a constructor with only one parameter, then yes, this name will be assigned as it, and ID will automatically be assigned to a garbage value. So you can say that is like a default constructor. And basically you can say a default constructor can create like it assigns garbage value to all those attributes which haven't been assigned anything explicitly.
I will like to add something on
Yeah.
Jitin's question. So basically, whatever constructor you invoke that has a particular set of parameters, like you pass parameter arguments. So the compiler will check if a constructor with similar or the same signature is there or not. If it is not there,
Yeah.
then it will throw an error. Or maybe if no
Uh,
argument is there, maybe default will be invoked. But if you pass, is it true? Like, am I?
yeah, I get it. Like if we pass one parameter and there's no constructor defined as such, then it will show an error. That's what you said, right? Yes, it would show an error because you do not have any constructor defined as such, right?
Yeah, and if I find a constructor which has the same signature as we are invoking, the compiler will invoke that constructor and will do nothing else. Like it won't. The other definitions will not matter.
No, other definitions will not matter, as well as I think for example, the attributes that we aren't initializing there would be initialized with some garbage value.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, that's it. If I make a custom destructor and don't delete the object and just have a print message as shown in one of the site, will the memory space? No, the object is deleted as like anyway the object is deleted. The destructor, if you are defining the custom destructor, you are adding stuff that has to be executed other than those freeing up the memory. The memory will always be free, but you are adding additional stuff that has to happen when you are deleting that object. Like here we have printed destructor called, but this is just printing the destructor. But the student S1, that memory will be free, but addition upon that destructor called will also be printed. Is that clear? Okay. So you can try these out where you can create multiple constructors with multiple number of parameters and test your programs. The mini project that we are going to give you, you can test it on that. It's a very simple and you can easily understand it. So earlier I was talking about I told you to ignore this public thing, right? This thing is known as an access specifier. So why do we have this notion of class? We also have a thing called struct in C++. Why don't we only use that? So the point is you can specify how the outside of this class accesses any attribute or any method that you have. So that can be that can be done using three access specifiers, that is public, private, and protected. What public does is that this thing is accessible to all. That like we were printing earlier, like s1.name, s1.id. This is something which is outside the class, but still we can access the attributes, right? So it is a public attribute. That these are public attributes that we can access. Even this method is a public method. So it is accessed by, it can be, we can initialize another method here, like set some find marks, maybe another some method called int find marks, and then that will be called. That method can be called from outside the class, but it cannot be called if it is declared under private. Like here we have two attributes, father name and mother name inside private. we can access these things only from inside our class. Like if the constructor calls these two attributes, then it is fine, well and good. But if any other function, like if we try to print, like for example, if we try to print s1 dot father name, then it will show that error that this thing has been declared private here. Access specifier is like you specify what kind of access, who all can access this attribute or this method. So in C++, there are three basic access specifiers. One is public, private, and protected. Public, everyone can access, no problem. Private, only the particular class can access those attributes or method. Protected is somewhat between public and private. Like normal functions cannot access it from outside the class. However, uh, you can access it from a class, an inherited class. We'll talk about inheritance more later, then we'll explore this protected part. Inheritance is basically, for example, you have a class vehicles and then you have multiple classes car, truck, bus. So all truck, car, and bus come under vehicles. So we can uh, define this, show this inheritance in our code too. So that we'll see how to do that in the next session. But so for example, if we have a protected variable inside the vehicle class, then that variable can be accessed by all the inherited classes. Like the car, truck, and bus can access those variables, but any other variables, any other class like a student cannot access those attributes of the vehicle class. Did you get it? Any doubts? Okay. So yeah, this is the same thing that the this S1, when we print S1 but father name, then we'll get an error that this thing has been declared private and you cannot access that. So as I told earlier, that we also have a structure thing. We have a thing called struct in this thing. You may have learned it in PDS too. Struct is basically, usually you define struct when you are defining nodes or when you are defining trees or graphs, like struct node and then another node star next, or a linked list when you are defining. Usually define this. Why do we need class if we already have struct? The point is the access specifiers. You can very easily model stuff private, protected, and public in a class, but in the structure, everything is public. So basically, class has an advantage over struct here, that it gives you more security, and you can hide implementation details inside a class, but you cannot hide implementation details usually in a struct. Like those things aren't there. Get it? Any doubts? Okay, I guess no. So this brings us to the last part. Like we have learned so much about hooks. What are the advantages over the conventional programming, the procedural programming that we do? So one of the main thing is it models the like real world well. This was the whole point of studying hooks, that you can model our real world whenever uh, if, for example, you work in a company and you have various small parts of applications that you want them to work together in a program. So you can define classes that, okay, this is the class used for encryption, this is the one used for decryption, and you can make sure that the decryption class doesn't know some stuff about the encryption class. Similarly, encryption class cannot know the stuff about decryption class, and we can model them to work together and it will be very easy to explain. It will be easy to understand. You can reuse stuff. because you have a class defined, right? You don't need to define different things again and again and again and again. You can just, you have a blueprint available, that is the class, and you can create various objects. And those objects do not need to interact with each other. They can be their individual entities. And at the same time, they're using the same blueprint. Also, this helps. Oops helps in very quick and parallel development. One person can create the class, one class, and the other person can create another class, and they won't matter once you bring them together in a program. You get it. You get it, right? Because they both are different entities and do not depend on each other. And even testing, you can test each classes differently. Also, the its advantage over the struct, it ensures that the some elements which you want to keep secure are secure with respect to other parts of the same program. Also, as it comes disadvantage, there are also some various disadvantages of hooks. Usually, like sometimes you force oops upon your code. You unnecessarily make classes for everything. For example, if your program is simple binary search, then you have got an array of some stuff and you have to do binary search. So you may end up creating some random class that would do a binary search on and give, like, which has an given array, which doesn't make sense. You do not need to do so much. But since your company has given you a structure that yeah, you need to use your program should be object oriented, then you are unnecessarily creating a class. Also, for example, you may have various algorithms, like you may have a searching algorithm, sorting algorithm, and in different classes. So you start unnecessarily creating relations or unnecessarily inheriting them. Like one, like you have, okay, you have a class named sorting, then you have a quick sort class, then you have a merge sort class, then you have a bubble sort class. You don't need to categorize them into classes. It doesn't make sense. But still, have since you have to create an oops, like the structure should be oops, you are doing that. Also, you generally tend to easily like go for procedural programming. With oops, sometimes the design can be tricky. This when I had my database, we have a subject called database management system where we have to do a project at last for the lab. So in that thing, I was creating classes, and I was unnecessarily creating classes, and it was so tricky to make them work together because I was using a framework called Django, which is in Python. What it does is you can create classes and objects, and it will convert that into our database. So you do not need to explicitly define stuff in your database, but defining those classes and inherit and doing that inheritance thing and all, that was very difficult, and that was what took most of the time doing in that project rather than the actual algorithms. So oops can sometimes be tricky. And you, like you said, and like I said, you need to do proper planning. Same in my project, I had to make a full flow chart of how my database looks, and then only I could convert it into the classes and stuff. And so you really need to properly learn oops first, and only then you can implement it. Like for, when you have started learning programming, you just, okay, you just learn C out. Okay, we'll do C out, and then you learn a sorting algorithm, you write that sorting algorithm. But with oops, you need to learn a lot of things first and then implement how the syntax is there, how we're creating the methods and stuff. Only then. So oops is sometimes hard to learn and implement, but once you know it is, when you know it, it is very useful in the real world or in the real programs. So I'll. So is there any doubt? Okay, I can see. How can class hide implementation details? Okay, I'll show. I'll tell you. For example, wait, I'll write the code and tell you. I'll show you this. For example, this is the class that we have. For example, we have a function get marks, and you may have some other things. You can see my screen, right? The code. Asha, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
For example, you have a get marks. So this get result or something. This has some implementation. This has some random implementation. This. Now, for result, you have marks of all the subjects. So rather than having all rather than writing everything here that okay, maths has this much weightage or English has this much weightage, the internals have this much weightage. You don't want others to see that. Maybe then you can write a function here that in get some other thing, internal weightage, and this is how you are kind of implementing. You're hiding implementation details, like you have internal weightage. So you are hiding this internal weightage from any other class. You cannot access this, right? So the implementation of getting this get result thing is hidden. So that's how we can hide the implementation details. Is it clear? Okay. If no access, what happens to accessibility when no access specifier is mentioned in the class? Let's run that and see. Okay. What if we have something like this, right? So we can see, even I didn't know this one. I didn't ever see this. So as we can see, the thing is declared private here. So as we can see from the result that whenever we do not mention our access specifier, it is declared private. You can see this, right? I didn't mention any access specifier and it shows an error that okay, this constructor is private and all these things are private. Okay. Okay. Any other doubts? Okay. So let's now jump to our mini project. Okay, we have this mini project. You guys can open this in your PCs too. I have shared the link here in the chat. I think Asha, we can share it later too, right? As in a mail. Yeah. Okay. So you can go to this GitHub repo, and you should go to episode 1 and click this missions.md. This will tell you what all you can create and what all you can try out to get more familiarized with this concept. I have skipped some small details, small errors which you might get while playing with oops and stuff. So I'll leave you to figure out all those things. And if you have a doubt, you can ask it to me anytime. In this, we have a very simple question or project to just create two classes, bike and car, and specify some attributes, specify some methods, and then try out these things and then ponder about these further part. What all you can get from it, and what will think you can try finding stuff that can result into an error. That would help you learn even more things. And once you figure out the error, try how you can solve those things. Like for example, you can here see that try declaring an object of class bike inside the bike class itself. Do you guys have any idea what would like happen if you create an object? Like we had created an object student, uh, a class student, right? What if we create rather than int id, we had a like student and the id? What would happen if you create an object of the same name as a class inside the class? What would happen? Any idea? No error. It would result in an error because like you're somewhat doing a recursive kind of a thing, and it will definitely show an error. So the thing is, for example, now you'll think, why would we need a object of like object bike inside a class bike? That doesn't make sense. But what if you want to make a graph or a linked list using classes? You know how to make a linked list? You may have learned in that PDS thing. You have a node, and you have another node, like the next node also stored inside that thing. So how would you define that inside using classes? How would you create a linked list using classes? You can try this out too, along with the mini project that I have given. That try out creating a linked list using classes, or a graph, or a tree, anything, your choice, whatever you feel you are comfortable with. Try creating that. And for this mini project, you can you can use any language. Python, Java, C++ would be better. And I have no idea about any other language. Like basically, in case of OOPS, so you can just create a PR. We may check out a few PRs, and we'll in 3 or 4 days get you the ideal solution. We'll upload the ideal solution, and then you can cross check some stuff from there, or even ask doubts. Is that clear? Do you have any other doubts?
Arushi, if someone wishes to study more on their own before our further seminars,
Yeah.
so how should they do that?
Okay, we have normal like there are 3 or 4 websites that are really good. I didn't find I didn't find any good book on this, but GFG is a very nice place for brief concepts and like giving you an idea about everything. You can say that for interview. There's also W3 schools, and that is a very nice place where you can learn concepts. Also, tutorials point. These things are there. I had some links, I think. I had some reference, mostly where they were from GFG. I think I can share some other references that I took, and I can share later, right?
Yes, we can
That
share them. Yeah.
yeah, I'll share all the references later. I also will tell you guys till that you guys can share any questions you have. I'll tell you what other things we have for the next one. Uh, So this we have for the next session, we'll touch on more core concepts of OOPS, basically data abstraction, encapsulation. These must be very new concepts for you, and inheritance polymorphism. These are the like core things that make OOPS. These things are sound like you need to know these things very well. These topics will be asked in the interviews. Any interviewers do not expect you to be go very deep in OOPS, but they need you to know these things very properly. Like they'll give you an example. There is a problem called diamond problem, which was asked to my friend last year in interviews. It is a part of this thing only, but you need to know very specifically what that is, how that works, and how do we solve that thing. So make sure you may read up these things before your next session, just to give you an idea. And once you have a session, you may get a stronger idea about these things. But make sure you do attend this session, because this will be very important and this will be the defining thing. In a real implementation, mostly inheritance and polymorphism is used as such, but but from an interview point of view, you should know everything about these things. Okay. Yeah, I just have references. I'll share them later. I think that's it. Any other questions? I'll wait 2 more minutes for any questions that you may have. You guys can find OOPS everywhere. Like if you have even done questions on LeetCode, you must have seen that LeetCode has this thing, solution. It has the class solution, and then inside it, when you see for anything, you see the class solution, and inside they have that public, and then you have the main function. And then if you look at some solutions, you can see that some people have declared some methods or some functions as private. So that is a very and that is something you can see in regularly. Many of the coding, like the places where online coding and competitions and stuff, you have this concept of classes. They make a class solution so that you just edit that thing and do not work outside that solution class, so that it doesn't you don't tamper with their code outside. It's a very real application that you have. Okay, I think there are no questions.
Yeah, so okay, thank you, Arushi. It was a very good start for the series. Hopefully, we will see the same enthusiasm from the attendees in the upcoming webinars also. Thank you all for attending the webinar. Hope to see you there in future too. So I guess we can stop here, Arushi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.